This is Objective 9, retrieve scraps of paper from server. At this point, we've helped Krampus win the Frito Slay cookie contest, and he shared with us that he has some papers on the student portal server that we need to retrieve. For this challenge, Peppermint Sticks would have given us hints for SQL map tamper scripts, and just general SQL injection. So before we even step into this challenge, we know that we're looking for some sort of SQL injection vulnerability on the student portal server. So let's go ahead and look at that server, and I've gone ahead and brought up Burp Suite and proxied my traffic through it, so the request will show up here on the right. And first things first, we need to look for somewhere that we can inject data. So the application form looks like a good place to start. Let's fill this out and see what happens. Okay, and we have a SQL error already. So likely that form is somewhere that we would want to explore further. So let's go ahead over into Burp and send this over to Repeater and play with it a little bit. So let's try the old classic. Semicolon or 1 equals 1, semicolon dash dash. If I can type it. Okay, send that over, and we can render the response, see what it looks like. Invalid or expired token. Well, that's no good. So we see a token being sent here. It's the last argument here, but I'm not really sure what that is. So let's go back at our HTTP history and take a look. We'll just walk through this. So this is the request for the index. Then we looked at the student body page. We looked at the application form. And then up here is where we posted to the application. But before that post, there's this call out to validator.php, which responds back with this string, which looked an awful lot like our token. Yep, so there it is there. So that is acting like a CSRF token. That needs to be appended to whatever our responses are. So it looks like that has a super quick timeout since it already came back as invalid. So we'll have to keep that in mind with our SQL map. So this is where the tamper script portion would come into play. So let's go back to SQL map, which I have it loaded up here, and check out the tamper script. So I've already created it, but we'll walk through it real quick. So I called it studentportal.py, and it's pretty straightforward. All I did was I imported requests, and I make a request out to that validator.php, the one that gives us that long base64 string, and I take that response and append it to the payload with the name token. So with that there, let's go ahead and run SQL map. And just quickly, these options are the page that we're trying to request for, our post body, which is just going to be all of those parameters that we saw in Burp. We're going to say tamper, our script name, and then I'm proxying it through Burp so we can see the request coming. So let's go ahead and kick that off, and we'll hop over into Burp and see what that looks like. And it looks like it's working. And let's check out some of these responses. Go ahead and render one of these. And we're getting this invalid or expired token even though we have our tamper script running. And let's see if we can figure out why. So right here, we can see our token is being URL encoded, which is no good. So it's actually getting appended to this name parameter instead of being its own parameter. So one thing we can do is, well, firstly stop our SQL map. Okay, it's paused. And we can tell Burp to automatically replace this with the correct value for us. So if we just copy that and come over into our options, come down to the match and replace rules, we can add a new one, and we're dealing with the request body. We want it to match on this, and it should say ampersand token equals. And go ahead and check that. I don't think that's really needed, but it's there now. Make sure that rule's enabled. We'll go back to our history and start SQL map again. This time, if all went correctly, we should see this auto-modified request come up, and there we see the token. So that's good. And just to make sure, we can render the response and see what it says. And alright, so we're getting our SQL errors again, which means SQL map is doing its job. So not much to do now, just let it run through and do its thing. So it's detected that it's a MySQL database, so it's going to skip checking for any of the other types of databases. And I'm going to let this run, and I'll come back once it's finished. After a few minutes, it comes back and tells us that the program is post parameter is vulnerable. Really, I think all of the parameters are vulnerable, but this is just the one that SQL Map decided to key off of. And now we can proceed with dumping the database. So we don't have to run through the entire thing again. Now we can just specify our session file and tell it to dump the contents. So we can do that by saying -s session dot SQLite and then dump. And what that's going to do is it's going to attempt to dump the database and put it all into our home directory. Oops, I made a little mistake there. You need to specify the full path to it. So it should live in your home directory in the .sql map output file, and then it'll create a different directory for each URL, and then it's session.sqlite. So if we do that, it'll pick up where it left off. It'll find the vulnerable post parameter, and it'll start enumerating the databases and pulling down the contents. So it looks like at this point we're fetching all of the submissions that we had done, so we can go ahead and stop this. And just by pressing Control-C, it'll come out of that database and go into another one. And now we can see our Krampus PNG files. So these all look like URLs that we could probably get from the web server. Just a nicer way of pulling it down though, if we go to our SQL map directory, into the dump elfU, we have krampus.csv, and we can just write a really quick script to just go through and pull down all these files. So for I in, and then we can say cat Krampus and pass that to cut, use comma as the delimiter, print out the second field, do, and then wget student portal, I think we need HTTP, just copy it. So hopefully that's going to pull down all of our images. Sure enough. So I'm just going to copy those to our other directory. Okay, and now we can open up Inkscape and look at these pictures. Whoops, meant to import instead of open there, but there we go. Now it should be fine. Okay, so we have all these scraps of paper now, so let's put them together and see if we can figure out what the message is. Okay, and there we go. We can start to read the note now. And the challenge was asking us what was the name of the super secret technology, and it looks like it's called the Super Sled-O-Matic. So let's go ahead and enter that in and see if that's correct. And there we are.